In April of 2026, the global economy was pushed right to the edge of collapse. And the trigger? It was a military standoff in the single most important energy choke point on the planet, the Strait of Hormuz. So in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly how this crisis exploded, piece by piece. Okay, let's just jump right into the middle of it. This whole crisis, it didn't kick off with some quiet diplomatic note. Nope. It started with this incredibly blunt statement from the US president. This wasn't just a shot across the bow. It was a clear-cut declaration of military action. And really, it set the tone for everything that came after. And here it is, the specific event that lit the match. The USS Spruance didn't just stop the Iranian ship, the Tauska. After a full 6 hours of warnings went completely ignored, they fired on it and disabled it. This was the very first seizure in this new American blockade, and it instantly flipped a tense situation into a live-fire conflict at sea. And this chart, wow, it shows you just how fast and how bad the fallout was. Think about it. Normally, you've got about 138 ships sailing through the Strait of Hormuz every single day. But by April, that number plummeted to just 16. 16! That's an 88% drop, practically overnight. The world's main energy pipeline was just shut off, gone. So that's the big question, right? How does the most critical waterway on Earth turn into an active war zone, seemingly in the blink of an eye? Let's retrace the steps that got us here. To really get what was happening in April, we have to rewind just a few weeks. Because the jump from a regional fight to a full-blown global emergency, it didn't take months. It happened with, well, just breathtaking speed. And this timeline just shows how fast things spun out of control. February 28th, the war officially starts. Just 5 days later, March 4th, Iran makes its big move, closing the strait. Then, fast forward to April 19th, and the US Navy is actively shooting at and seizing ships. We're talking less than 2 months to go from conflict to a total blockade. Each move just cornered the other side even more. And here's the kicker. There was no way out. No off-ramp. You had hardline governments in both Washington and Tehran, and neither was willing to budge an inch. The doors for diplomacy, they were slammed shut and locked. So this wasn't just a military fight anymore. It had become all-out economic warfare. All right, now let's talk about the economic fallout, because the second those ships stopped moving through Hormuz, the shockwaves hit every market on every continent, almost instantly. Okay, so this is where it gets really, really interesting. How does a regional conflict immediately freeze the entire global supply chain? Well, it all comes down to this one legal term, force majeure. It literally means superior force, and you can think of it as a get-out-of-jail-free card for companies. When something totally catastrophic and out of their control happens, like a war, this clause lets them break their contracts without penalty. It's wild, right? It's how a legal document can stop a massive oil tanker dead in the water. And just like that, everybody started pulling that emergency cord. Qatar Energy, one of the biggest players in natural gas, just stopped production. Kuwait and Bahrain declared force majeure on their oil sales. And then came the shipping giants, Maersk, CMA CGM, Hapag-Lloyd. They all just froze their operations in the region. A single legal phrase set off a very real physical shutdown. And the markets? They went into an immediate panic. The price of Brent crude oil, which is the global standard, shot up to almost $120 a barrel. That's a 40% spike. And that started sparking fears of global stagflation. You know, that terrible economic mix where prices for everything go up, but the economy itself just stalls out. It's the worst of both worlds. This chart just lays out perfectly why this was such a catastrophe. I mean, look at these numbers. You're talking about a third of the world's proven oil reserves, a quarter of all the oil that moves by sea, and a fifth of the world's natural gas trade, all trying to squeeze through this one tiny passage that was now completely blocked. Yeah, the International Energy Agency, basically the world's energy watchdog, they didn't pull any punches. They said this wasn't just another crisis. This was, flat out, the single biggest disruption the oil market had ever seen. Ever. But you know, every crisis creates an opportunity for someone. With all the usual energy supplies from the Gulf cut off, countries got desperate and started looking elsewhere. And that led to this incredible shift in geopolitics, with one country perfectly set up to cash in. Now, this is fascinating. The whole crisis started to pivot on something that most of us never even think about: ship insurance. While Western insurance companies were backing away from Russian oil, India, the world's third biggest oil importer, spotted a huge opening. They didn't just okay a couple of Russian insurers, they gave them the green light for years to come. And this is so critical. An oil tanker literally cannot sail without insurance. It's the absolute foundation of all maritime trade. So by giving these Russian firms the thumbs up, India basically built its own energy safety net. It made sure that Russian oil could keep flowing its way, essentially letting it sidestep the crisis that was crippling everyone else. So when you add it all up, you get one very clear winner. As the experts pointed out, Russia was enjoying these massive, unintended relative gains. Why? Because they'd already spent years building an alternative financial system to get around sanctions. So when the Western-backed system broke down, Russia's system was really the only game in town for countries like India. So that brings us to the big question. What now? Where does all this go? With the global economy hanging in the balance, analysts pretty much see three ways this can play out, and none of them look particularly good. Okay, option one is the best-case scenario, but also the least likely. A diplomatic deal is struck, and the strait reopens. Option two is this really ugly, grinding stalemate, where you have warships trying to escort a handful of tankers through a live war zone. And then there's the worst-case scenario, full-scale escalation. That's when strikes on energy facilities ramp up and cause a complete, long-term shutdown that would just shatter the global economy. And that leaves us with this final, honestly, pretty chilling thought. The fundamental belief our entire globalized world was built on, that energy would just keep flowing no matter what, was completely shattered. This crisis proved it was all just an illusion. We've been reminded that these economic lifelines we depend on, they aren't strong, protected arteries. They're fragile, exposed veins that can be cut at any moment. And the big question now is, what do we do knowing that?